Bookmark go back today was the day my fiancé Michael Dawson and I were supposed to register our marriage, after waiting for him at the Civil Affairs Bureau for 3 hours. I finally got through to him on the phone only to hear the voice of his old flame Emily White. "Where's Michael?" I asked. "He's cooking for me," she said casually. "Is there something you need Miss Miller cooking?" I let out a mocking little laugh. I'd been with Michael for 2 years, and never knew he could even cook. Just then I heard my Michael's voice on the other end. "Caitlin." Emily almost fainted. "Today her family's not around, so I'm just helping take care of her." Caitlin Miller never once fainted in my life, but today of all days, she just happened to pass out. On the exact day we were supposed to get our marriage certificate. What perfect timing! I suddenly gripped my phone tighter. "Michael, let me ask you just one thing, are you still coming today to register our marriage?" "I really can't get away right now," he replied, sounding impatient. "It won't matter if we do it a couple days later." I was about to speak when I suddenly heard Emily's startled voice in the background. "Ah, that's hot." Followed immediately by the call disconnecting. I didn't need to see it to know exactly what was happening. Michael, full of concern, fussing over her, comforting her like she was the most fragile, precious thing in the world. Ever since Emily returned, all she had to do was tear up a little and Michael would act like his heart was breaking. But me, I never got that kind of treatment in Michael's eyes. I was supposed to be sensible, understanding and mature. He never once realized that I was also a woman, someone who sometimes needed his care too. My chest tightened instinctively, but not in the kind of pain I expected listening to the cold, empty tone on the line. I took a deep breath, curved my lips into a bitter smile, and sent him a single message: "Michael Dawson, let's break up. I've had enough." Since he insisted on comforting his precious Emily, then fine, I'd let them be together. But just as I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I saw someone standing by the entrance. It was Jacob Ye, my boss. The CEO of Ye Group. I paused in surprise as his secretary. I had no idea this visit was part of his schedule today. "Mr. Ye, are you getting married today too?" I asked. Jacob cast a brief glance at me with his dark eyes and responded with a calm yes. "Well, congratulations," I offered. I wanted to ask why he'd come alone, but I reminded myself that as his secretary, I had no business prying into his personal life. I swallowed the question that had reached my lips. Then Jacob gave me a slight smile. "Miss Miller, would you like to marry me?" "No," I blinked, caught off guard. Was Jacob also stood up? His voice was deep and steady. "Since both of us are alone now, why not just marry each other?" Just then Michael's message came through. "Caitlin, stop it. Emily really is sick. Be good. We'll register our marriage in a couple of days." I looked at Jacob and smiled. "Sure, let's do it." In less than 10 minutes, I had a brand new marriage certificate in my hand. As I stared at the photo on it, I suddenly wondered, had I acted too impulsively, having second thoughts already? Jacob asked, his tone light. I pressed my lips together, then asked him back, "Are you doing this because you're angry at Miss Johnson?" As his secretary, I knew a bit about his private life. I'd even helped him pick out gifts for this Miss Johnson. I'd never seen her in person, but any woman Jacob went to that much effort for couldn't have been ordinary. Jacob looked at me and said in a quiet voice, "She's not even worth it. You'll understand later." When it came to my boss, I usually just did what he said. After all, he's the one who paid my salary. But just now I felt like there was a trace of private sorrow in his eyes that didn't match the domineering CEO persona he always gave off. After parting ways with Jacob, I went back to my small apartment. While I was with Michael, we never fully lived together. So I had bought this place for myself. As soon as I got home, I deleted and blocked every way to contact him. From now on he could walk his solitary road, and I would walk mine on a wide sunlit path. And then it hit me. That path now included Jacob. He said he'd give me a week to adjust, and after that I would need to move into his place. The thought of spending nearly 24 hours a day with him made me uneasy. During the day he'd be my boss, and at night I suddenly felt lost. I had no idea why Jacob had suggested this whole contract marriage idea. Was he also angry at Miss Johnson? After all, I'd only been his secretary for a month. We barely even knew each other, and yet I actually agreed. Was I thinking clearly, or was I just swayed by his looks? I was still lost in thought when my phone suddenly rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Caitlin Miller, did you block me?" Michael Dawson's gritted voice came through the line, full of frustration. I could imagine how dark his expression looked at that moment. That was just how he was every time I acted even slightly emotional. He would immediately label it as being unreasonable, and give me attitude, yet he never seemed to mind Emily White acting like that around him. How did he not see the version of me before yesterday, the one who always made excuses for him, and tried to keep the peace? Well, now we were broken up, why wouldn't I block him? My sarcastic tone seemed to infuriate him even more. Can you stop being so immature? If you still want to register our marriage, we can go tomorrow. I actually laughed. Michael, you're not the only man in the world. You've lost your chance with that. I hung up and blocked him completely, swift and decisive. The next morning as I headed down for work, a familiar car stopped beside me. It was Michael's. He got out and walked up to me. The first words out of his mouth already sharp. Caitlin Miller, are you done with this tantrum? Can you stop being childish? Blocking someone like that is just ridiculous. I rolled my eyes. Mr. Dawson, have you lost your memory? We've already broken up. He stared at me, and for the first time it seemed to hit him that I wasn't joking. Emily really was sick yesterday. I was just taking care of her. If that's why you're mad, I apologize. Such a half-hearted apology. I couldn't help but wonder how I managed to put up with him for 2 whole years. I sighed, feeling sorry for the version of myself who used to tolerate all this. I looked up at him. Michael, you and Emily both know exactly what kind of relationship you have as your ex-girlfriend. Let me offer one piece of advice. Open your eyes. Step aside. Caitlin, he said, clearly annoyed. What are you trying to say? Emily hasn't done anything to you. She's just a good friend of mine. Of course, she was the one he held closest to his heart. And he couldn't stand me saying a single bad word about her. I shrugged indifferently, pushed past him, and raised my hand to flag down a taxi. Just then a sleek black Bentley pulled up beside me. A driver stepped out and walked over briskly. Ma'am, Mr. Yi has a meeting today and asked me to drive you to work, he said politely. It took me a few seconds to process what he meant by Mr. Yi. He was referring to Jacob Wright. I had almost forgotten that I married him just yesterday. That's the downside of a flash marriage. Before I could say anything, Michael turned sharply to the driver and asked, what did you just call her? The driver glanced at him. This is my employer's wife. Of course I called her ma'am. Michael looked stunned. Caitlin Miller, when did you get married? Yesterday, I said lightly, then turned away and got into the car without another glance. That must have hit him hard. Michael had always assumed I would never leave him, that I was someone he could keep around no matter how many times he ditched our dates for Emily. And in the past I always forgave him, but not this time. Back at the office I quickly threw myself into work mode. First I organized all the documents from various departments that needed Jacob Yi's review, then handed them to his assistant Sean Phone. But Sean didn't take the documents. Instead he smiled and said, from now on, Miss Miller, you'll be delivering these to him personally. I hesitated when I was suddenly promoted to CEO's secretary. Sean had given me a list of rules to follow. One of them was never to enter Jacob's office without permission. Sensing my hesitation, Sean explained. The CEO said you can go in and out of his office freely from now on. There was something meaningful in his tone. I figured he must have already heard about my marriage to Jacob. Fine. Holding the documents, I reluctantly walked over and knocked on the door. Truthfully, I still hadn't figured out how to face Jacob. Having my boss suddenly become my husband, it was undeniably awkward. Behind the massive desk, Jacob was reading a file intently. I quickly placed the documents on the desk, hoping to leave quietly, but behind me came that familiar cool voice, Miss Miller. I took a deep breath, forced a professional smile, and turned around. Mr. E, I've placed the documents on your desk. Do you have any other instructions? He set his pen down, leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, and looked at me with a faint smile in his eyes. I instinctively reached up and touched my face. Had my light makeup from this morning smudged? After a moment he finally spoke. Have you eaten breakfast? I responded quickly. Are you asking if you want me to order breakfast? I'll get on that right away. I'd done it a few times before when Sean asked me to arrange breakfast for him. Jacob's lips curved slightly. You really are a dedicated employee, Miss Miller. I suppose so, I replied. Otherwise you wouldn't have promoted a new hire like me to be your secretary. I wasn't being modest, honestly. I couldn't think of any other reason. I had originally applied for a position in the design department, but I was suddenly informed that I'd been hired as the CEO's secretary. If it weren't for the doubled salary, I wouldn't have accepted the job. Jacob's eyes glinted briefly at my words, then he raised a hand and pointed toward the side cabinet. There's breakfast over there, go eat. I froze a little confused, not quite understanding what he meant. Jacob, ever patient, added. Your stomach problems are because you don't eat regularly, especially skipping breakfast. That breakfast is for you, eat it. The last time he brought me breakfast, I already had a strange feeling, and now how did he even know I had stomach issues? I couldn't help but ask Mr. Yi, how do you know I have a stomach problem, and how do you know I skip breakfast? His tone remained calm and cool. You're my secretary, shouldn't I know a few things about you? After a pause he looked at me again, and besides, Miss Miller, have you forgotten you're not just my employee anymore? You're also the person listed on my marriage certificate. I have no intention of becoming a widower, right after getting married. The way he said it sounded emotionless, but something about it made my chest tighten slightly. A strange warmth began to well up inside me. Michael and I had been together for 2 years. He never once noticed my health issues, much less reminded me to eat. I remember one time when my stomach hurt so badly I could barely move, I called him and asked if he could bring me some medicine. All he said was just order it on mate when I'm busy, then he hung up before I could say anything else. Later I accidentally found out from one of his friends that Michael's urgent matter that day was picking Emily up from the airport. I realized then that in his heart, I would always come after her, maybe the whole time we were together was just because Emily hadn't returned yet. Maybe I was just a stand-in. Miss Miller, that faint clean masculine scent drifted past my nose, snapping me back to reality. Jacob's handsome face suddenly filled my vision, and my heart skipped a beat. Mr. Yeah, is there something you need? With just one sentence Jacob had wiped away all the suffocating emotions I'd been carrying. He raised his hand and tapped my forehead lightly. Stop spacing out, eat your breakfast. That small gesture made my face flush with a soft pink. Instinctively I glanced toward the office door, worried someone might walk in and see us. Even though I had married Jacob Ye, I still didn't want anyone at the company to know. Who knew how many people would start gossiping behind my back? Jacob noticed my cautious expression and chuckled. Relax, not just anyone can come into my office. I quickly walked over to the coffee table and picked up the breakfast. Then I'll just bring it back to my desk and eat. You're not afraid people might misunderstand when they see you walk out of my office with breakfast? He asked lightly. I paused mid-step. He had a point. Silently I turned and sat down on the couch. Then I'll eat here before going back. Only then did Jacob seem satisfied. He returned to his desk and continued reviewing his files. The office fell into an almost uncomfortable silence. So much so that I didn't even dare chew too loudly, afraid I'd break the stillness. I had to admit the breakfast he prepared really suited my taste. It was gentle on my stomach, thoughtful even. He actually seemed like a surprisingly considerate person. I glanced up without thinking, looking over at the man behind the desk. The warm office lighting cast soft shadows across his chiseled features, sharp and handsome. I remembered how some female colleagues had always swooned over him before. I had only seen him as my boss, so I never really noticed. But now, sitting here and looking at him properly, I had to admit he was genuinely attractive, and somehow I had married him. Perhaps sensing my stare, Jacob looked up. I panicked and quickly looked away, stuffing the last bite of breakfast into my mouth. Then I stood up and said, Mr. Yi, I've finished eating, I'll head back to work. Just as I reached the door, I heard his warm voice behind me. Caitlin, let's have dinner together tonight. I didn't respond, not yes or no, and hurried out of the office. Honestly, I didn't know how to handle being called Caitlin like that when I was with Michael Dawson. I had always been the one chasing after him. Now suddenly being treated this way, especially by my boss, it felt unfamiliar. Soon the workday ended. By the time I wrapped up everything I had to do, it was already 7 p.m. I glanced over at the CEO's office. The lights were still on. I had no idea when he'd finished for the day. I wondered if he remembered what he said about dinner this morning. If he forgot, that might actually be better. Staring at Jacob Yi's face for too long might send my heart into overdrive. Just as the thought crossed my mind, a message popped up on WeChat. Jacob, yeah, I'm waiting in the parking garage. I sighed quietly and accepted my fate, heading downstairs. Miss Miller, are you waiting for someone? A voice called out near the elevator in the garage. It was Leo Lin, the marketing manager. I nodded yeah. He stared at me for a moment, then asked, Caitlin, when are you free? Let's grab dinner sometime. I frowned slightly. When I first joined the company, Leo had invited me to dinner more than once. I had turned him down every time, but he still hadn't given up. I knew exactly what he was thinking. I was just about to politely decline again, when my phone rang, seeing Jacob's name on the screen. I quickly picked up. Hello, Exit B, got it, I'm on my way. Hanging up, I gave Leo a quick nod before hurrying toward Exit B. Sure enough, Jacob's Bentley was waiting there. I instinctively reached for the back door, strove intending to sit in the back seat. But his voice came from the driver's seat. Do you really think I'm your chauffeur, Miss Miller? I laughed softly and slid into the front passenger seat. Habit, I guess. He gave me a glance. Seems pretty popular. That comment had a bit of an edge to it. I paused, then realized he must have seen me talking to Leo. Wait, was Jacob Ye jealous? As soon as that idea hit me, I felt a surge of boldness and addressed him directly. Jacob Ye, are you jealous? He let out a low snort and didn't answer, starting the car instead. But I clearly saw his hands tighten ever so slightly on the steering wheel. It was the kind of awkwardness you feel when someone hits a nerve too accurately. Jacob didn't say anything, but his reaction earlier had me feeling exposed. The restaurant he took me to for dinner was a 5-star Western place, of course. Life with someone like him came with these perks. While we were waiting for the food, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I saw Jacob standing at the far end of the corridor, finishing up a phone call. Just as I lifted my foot to walk toward him, I spotted a familiar figure suddenly bumping into him. It looked accidental, but I could tell she had done it on purpose. That woman, wasn't she Emily White? Oh no. I'm so sorry, Emily exclaimed, her voice syrupy sweet enough to give anyone goosebumps. She looked up at Jacob, pretending to be flustered. Jacob immediately took a big step back and shot her a quick, unimpressed glance. Still putting on an innocent act, she said softly, "Hi sir, can I add you on WeChat?" "No." Jacob replied coldly, then turned and walked off without hesitation. Emily stomped her foot in frustration, clearly upset by the rejection. Watching the whole scene unfold, I couldn't help but curl my lips into a cold smile. That little stunt she pulled just now, trying to flirt with Jacob, was obviously intentional. I wondered what Michael would think if he saw this. After all, Emily had always been the innocent pure girl in his eyes, his beloved untouched Emily. When I returned to the table, the food had already been served. I was surprised to see that Jacob had ordered all my favorite dishes. He really seemed to know me well. We were halfway through the meal when a familiar voice interrupted. "Miss Miller, what are you doing here?" I didn't even have to look up, I knew it was Emily. Then came Michael's voice, full of anger. "Caitlin Miller, is this why you broke up with me? Because you already had someone else?" I had originally planned to ignore them both, but hearing the way they spoke to me as if I owed them something, I couldn't help but laugh. "And what does where I am or who I'm with have to do with either of you?" Emily looked hurt. "But this is a 5-star couples restaurant and you're here with another man." "I wasn't having it. What, do you own this place, or are you saying I'm not good enough to eat here, that I can't have dinner with another man?" Michael's face darkened and even Emily's sweet expression began to crack. "Caitlin, you're the one in the wrong here. Why are you being so aggressive?" Michael snapped. "Who is this man? Why are you with him?" A cool, calm voice cut in before I could answer. "You're not qualified to know." Jacob, who had kept his back to them until now, had slowly turned around. His cold gaze swept over both Michael and Emily. Emily was the first to freeze, her triumphant smile fading into jealousy. So the man she had just tried to flirt with was him. Michael too was clearly shaken by Jacob's intimidating presence. He stood stiffly, stunned into silence. I stepped beside Jacob and slipped my arm through his, smiling. I said, "Let me introduce you, this is my husband, Jacob Ye." What? Michael's face twisted in disbelief. "Isn't he your boss?" No wonder he looked familiar. Michael had seen him once from afar at a business banquet. Jacob Ye, the CEO of Ye Group. That's when I remembered. Back when I first got the job as Jacob's secretary, I'd mentioned it to Michael. He had casually replied something like, "A guy like that probably just sees your work potential." In his eyes there was no way someone like me could ever attract a man like Jacob. He must have forgotten that I had always been among the top 3 in school both in academics and looks. Jacob looked down at me, then turned to them and said calmly, "Yes, I'm Caitlin's boss, but I'm also her husband now. Since you already know who I am, Mr. Dawson, I suggest you stop bothering my wife." He didn't even spare Michael another glance. Michael might be from a wealthy family, but compared to Jacob, he wasn't even in the same league. Furious but unable to say anything, he could only glare at me. Emily clenched her fists. "Miss Miller, didn't you plan to register your marriage with Michael just yesterday? How did you end up marrying Mr. Y instead?" She still refused to believe I could be this lucky. I looked at her coolly and said, "Well then I suppose I have you to thank. If you hadn't clung to Michael yesterday, I might have missed out on Jacob." If it hadn't been for that, I paused for a moment, raised my eyebrows slightly, then added, "But Emily, you seem to have a thing for all the men in my life." I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times, then handed it over to Michael. "Take a look at what your so-called pure and kind-hearted girl is really like." I hadn't intended to go this far, but Emily just wouldn't stop provoking me. The video showed her trying to flirt with Jacob, something I had recorded earlier. Emily leaned over to watch and immediately widened her eyes. Michael wasn't stupid. Of course he knew what Emily's intentions had been when she approached Jacob. Still, whether out of pride or a desperate need to trust her, he chose to turn that blame toward me. His face darkened as he looked at me. "Caitlin, I know exactly what kind of person Emily is. You really think this video proves anything? Look at yourself. You were my fiancé, and now suddenly you're married to someone else. What, were you already sleeping with your boss, and just pretending to break up with me?" Listening to him twist everything into my fault, accusing me of cheating, was so absurd it made me laugh. In his version of the story, he was the victim. What a joke. I must have been out of my mind to ever fall for him. Emily, hearing Michael speak in her defense, let out a small breath of relief. A hint of triumph flickered in her eyes. She knew Michael would always take her side. I gave a cold, mocking smile. "Michael, you can think whatever you want. I've already stepped aside so you and Emily can be together. I'm married now, let's just move on with our lives. If we see each other again, let's pretend we're strangers." Michael opened his mouth, but Jacob cut in with a frosty tone. "Mr. Dawson, up until yesterday, before the marriage registration, Joey and I had a strictly professional relationship. And though we don't owe you any explanation, I won't tolerate anyone slandering my wife." Then he picked up my bag, gently took my hand, and said, "Let's go." I let him lead me out of the restaurant. It had been so long since anyone had defended me like that. In that moment my exhausted heart felt a rare sense of peace, and maybe even a flutter. A week passed quickly, and I gradually got used to my relationship with Jacob. Though he didn't give me any special treatment at work, I had to admit he was a pretty great husband. Thoughtful, considerate, I began to feel like I might actually be lucky. I got stood up at the registry office and ended up marrying Jacob instead. The only thing I still couldn't quite figure out was whether Jacob had also been stood up that day and married me on impulse. I'd asked him once, but he only smiled and said it's not time to talk about that yet. After that I didn't press further. As we agreed, I moved into his villa. But just as I settled in, Jacob went away on a business trip, saving us both from the awkwardness of jumping straight into cohabitation. Even while he was away, he still messaged me daily, reminding me to eat on time. And for the first time in a long while, my stomach issues didn't flare up. After work today, I stopped by my old apartment to pack a few more things. A cool autumn breeze blew through as I stepped out of the building, sending a slight chill over me. I walked to the street corner to catch a cab, when suddenly a dark figure appeared behind me. Getting closer and closer, I quickened my pace, but a large hand grabbed my arm. Startled, I cried out, "Ah, it's me!" Michael's voice. I looked up, still rattled, and sure enough, it was Michael Dawson. "What are you doing here?" I asked sharply. "I've been waiting for you for days. I finally caught you." His voice was slurred with a strong stench of alcohol. I frowned and pulled my arm free forcefully. "We've broken up. What are you waiting for me for? You were right," he muttered. "Emily lied to me. All she wanted was a richer man, so he had watched the video." Maybe he even investigated her afterward. I arched an eyebrow. Well, congratulations, you finally saw her for who she really is. But what does that have to do with me? Michael's expression darkened with regret. I'm sorry, can we not break up? I laughed, speechless. So only after his beloved Emily betrayed him did he suddenly realize my worth. Michael, I'm married, I said firmly. Even if I weren't, there still wouldn't be a chance for us. Ask yourself honestly, in the past 2 years, did you really love me, or was I just Emily's stand-in? I suddenly recalled a night when Michael had gotten drunk and kept calling out Evie. At the time I'd naively assumed it was some nickname for me, but now that I think about it, he was calling her in his heart. It had always been Emily, I'd just been too stupid to see it. I had been moved by every soft Evie that spilled from his lips, thinking it meant something. Michael was silent for a moment, then reached out to grab my hand again. Evie, Caitlin. I've thought about it, the one I really like is you, I just didn't realize it before. Somewhere along the way I fell for you without knowing it. So what? I looked at him, completely unmoved by the sudden confession. You say you like me and I'm just supposed to like you back? Do me a favor, don't contact me again. I don't want my husband to misunderstand. The moment I said that, Michael's eyes turned frighteningly red, and his grip on my wrist tightened. I tried to shake him off, but couldn't. A wave of fear began to rise in my chest. Let go of me, Michael. Suddenly he staggered backward from a solid punch, almost collapsing to the ground. I turned and saw Jacob standing there, his expression cold and eyes narrowed. I warned you, Michael Dawson, Jacob said through clenched teeth, don't bother my wife again. Michael wiped the corner of his mouth, smearing away a bit of blood fueled by alcohol. He puffed himself up in defiance. She was my fiancée, you're the one who interfered. I looked at him and let out a cold laugh, showing him no mercy. Michael, do you not feel ridiculous pretending to be the victim? Right now I'm married to Jacob Yee. I'm his wife now, not yours, so go live your own life. Stop showing up in ours. With that I grabbed Jacob's hand and walked away, leaving Michael stunned on the sidewalk. Once we were in the car, I hesitated for a moment before saying I just came back to get a few things. I didn't know Michael would be there. Whether Jacob would overthink it or not, I still felt the need to explain. No point letting something meaningless cause unnecessary misunderstanding. Jacob gave a low hum. I know. I'm just glad you're okay. Just that simple sentence warmed something deep in my chest. He'd come looking for me as soon as he got back from a business trip. This was what it felt like to be truly cared for. Jacob, I murmured, can I hug you? Without waiting for a response, I leaned over and wrapped my arms tightly around him. In this moment I wasn't thinking of him as my boss, but simply as my husband. His body stiffened slightly, but then he raised his arms and gently held me in return. Caitlin Miller, he whispered, you have me from now on. There was a certainty in his voice and maybe even a trace of quiet longing. No man had ever said anything like that to me before. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my chest, and if I hadn't been clear-headed, I might have really believed Jacob had loved me for a long time. That weekend I stayed home, curled up with the idea of painting. I had majored in design during college, but it had been a long time since I'd picked up a brush. I called Jacob. Jacob, I'd like to do some painting. Would it be okay if I used your study? On the other end of the line, he seemed to pause for a second before answering. Use the room next to my study, it's quieter, go ahead. By the way, he added, when will you be home? Soon. Do you want dessert? I can bring some. I blinked surprised, then smiled softly. If it's not too much trouble, then sure, thank you. I've always had a sweet tooth, but I never expected Jacob to notice that. After hanging up the phone, I gathered my art supplies and headed to the room he had mentioned. Since moving in about 2 weeks ago, I'd never once stepped into that space. But the moment I opened the door, I stood there in shock. It was an art studio. Inside were shelves of painting supplies, canvases, easels, brushes, all pristine and unopened. Could it be that Jacob also liked painting? As his secretary, I was well versed in his background and professional profile. But I'd never seen painting listed as one of his interests. Still, the studio was warm and inviting. I quickly got lost in the quiet rhythm of painting. I had no idea how much time had passed until the door slowly opened. Jacob stepped in, holding a dessert box and a bouquet of yellow roses. Are you finished? He asked. I set down my brush and stood up to face him. Yeah, I haven't painted in a long time, so I'm a little rusty. Jacob leaned in to look at the canvas, then gave a slight smile. Not bad, seems like you haven't lost your touch. But my attention was already on the items in his hands. I hadn't even heard what he said. Are the flowers for me? Of course, he said naturally, they're for my wife. Girls usually like flowers, right? He handed them to me, then set the dessert box down on a nearby table. You can try some now, dinner will be ready soon. As I held the bouquet, a rich fragrance rose to meet me, my lips curved into a soft smile. Without me even realizing it, so this is what it feels like to be cherished. The dessert was a beautifully decorated strawberry cake, my favorite flavor. Jacob, I'm starting to think you're a boss who knows his employees a little too well. He glanced at me, his lips tugging into a smirk. I only know you this well. A warm flush rose to my cheeks, and I quickly changed the subject. So what's with the art studio, do you paint too? Jacob's eyes narrowed slightly at the corners. I don't paint, Ben. All of this was for me. I asked mid-sentence, but he calmly interrupted, yes. I pressed my lips together. If I still didn't realize something was off by now, I'd truly be dense. I looked up at him directly. How did you know I could paint? I'm sure I didn't put that in my resume. He replied slowly and steadily. You originally applied for a position in the design department. Anyone who studied design probably knows how to paint, but this room is clearly set up for oil painting. I said, fixing my eyes on his, hoping to catch some subtle change in expression. How did you know I specifically like oil painting? But Jacob was perfectly composed. No trace of guilt or discomfort crossed his face. He simply smiled and said, just wait a bit longer, I'll tell you someday. Then after a pause he added, Miss Miller, a university's anniversary is next week. Add it to my schedule with that. He turned and walked out of the studio. It took me a few seconds to register what he'd said. Jacob went to a university with someone like him. He must have been the kind of campus legend people never stop talking about. So why had I never heard of him before? A few days later, the day of a university's anniversary arrived. I hadn't planned to return, but since Jacob had been invited back as a guest of honor, I tagged along in my capacity as his secretary. While helping him review the event details, I learned that E-Group had donated generously to a university every year. No wonder the school listed him as a special guest. I hadn't been back since graduation. So I took the chance to wander the campus while Jacob met with the dean and other alumni leaders. The air was familiar, the paths unchanged, but of course bad luck has a sense of humor. I ran into Emily Whitewell. Technically she had been a student here too, so it wasn't that surprising. I immediately averted my gaze, pretending I hadn't seen him, and started to walk a different route. But the moment he saw me, he made a beeline straight toward me. Unlike the delicate, tearful act she always put on around Michael, Emily now looked fierce and overbearing. As she stormed toward me shouting, Caitlin Miller, did you say something to Michael? Is that why he's been ignoring me lately? I raised an eyebrow. So when Michael asked to get back together with me the other day, he really was serious. I guess he finally gave up on her, curling my lips into a mocking smile. I replied, you know exactly what you did behind Michael's back. He's not stupid, Emily. She clenched her jaw in frustration. It's all your fault. If you hadn't shown him that video, he never would have started doubting me. So now I'm the villain, I scoffed. Michael was just a man I didn't want anymore. Why would I waste my time trying to get revenge on you two? You're not that important. Emily's arrogant expression twisted with fury, then she sneered. You think you're so special just because you landed a rich man? Do you really believe someone like Jacob Yee is actually serious about you? He's just playing with you. How do you know I'm not serious about my wife? A cold, composed voice cut through the tension. Jacob had arrived, slipping an arm around my waist, as he stared Emily down with sharp, icy eyes. I've said it before and I'll say it again, he continued, the only woman I've ever cared about in this life is my wife. His words stunned both me and Emily into silence. Emily's face twisted with disbelief. Her heart must have shattered in that moment. There was nothing she could say, no tricks left to use, she knew now. Jacob would never look at her the way she wanted. But me and Jacob's words, I finally began to understand something I'd been ignoring all along. I looked at him. Jacob, did you know me long before this? Instead of answering directly, he said gently, come with me, there's somewhere I want to take you. With Emily's unwilling gaze burning behind us, Jacob took my hand, our fingers intertwining, and led me away. He brought me to a place I knew well, a university's art studio. The space was just as I remembered during my 4 years here. I'd spent countless hours painting in this room. I tilted my head toward him. How did you know about this place? Did you really go to a university? Jacob nodded. I did, but I only stayed for 6 months before going abroad. Everything suddenly clicked. No wonder I'd never heard of him on campus. If he had stayed longer, someone like him would have been the talk of the entire school. He chuckled softly. What kind of person am I? Then I search my brain for words. Handsome, charismatic, a man who looks like he walks straight out of a dream. Jacob smiled faintly. So that's how highly you think of me, Mrs. Yi. His eyes were fixed on me, with a heat that made my heart flutter. Then he spoke again, his voice gentle. 6 years ago I saw a girl here so bright, she lit up everything around her. A memory stirred in my mind. That girl, was it me? I asked, unsure. I didn't remember ever meeting him before. He didn't answer. Instead, his gaze turned distant as he continued. That day I happened to walk by the studio. Through the window, I saw a girl in a white dress with a high ponytail, completely focused on her painting. The sunlight coming through the window lit her up, like she was glowing. She was beautiful. My heart skipped. I found out later there was such a girl at our school. The second time I saw her was at the freshman welcome gala. She played a piano piece beautifully. That was when I learned her name, Caitlin Miller. He paused for a moment, then added, at the time I was a campus legend. After the gala, a lot of students tried to get close to me, but she didn't even notice I was there. He gave a soft laugh. After that, I deliberately take detours past the studio. I ran into her several times. Every time she was lost in her own world, completely unaware of everything outside it. By now my eyes were already brimming with tears. My voice trembled as I whispered, and then you left, Jacob. He turned his gaze back to me, eyes steady and warm. Yes. Studying abroad was part of my original plan, but meeting you, that wasn't. He took a breath, then said softly, even after I left, your image stayed with me for 5 years. I couldn't forget you. His words hit me like a fist to the heart. My tears finally spilled over, clouding my vision blurred with tears. I had always known I was attractive. People had told me so since I was young, and I'd received more love letters than I could count, but to think someone could quietly hold on to their feelings for 5 whole years. That kind of love I had never imagined, let alone dared to hope for. I looked up at Jacob. Why didn't you ever come find me? He gently reached up and wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes. His voice was a little hoarse. By the time I came back, you were already with Michael Dawson. I could only keep my feelings buried, but I never expected you to apply for a position at Yi Group. Maybe that was fate giving me a second chance. I sniffled softly. So you made me your secretary on purpose? Jacob chuckled and gave my nose a light tap. Promoting you to secretary was partly selfish, yes, but you also met all the qualifications. You really thought HR would have passed your resume to me if you weren't up to standard. I pressed my lips together. That day at the registry office, who were you supposed to marry if you still had feelings for me? I asked, my voice low. Why would you agree to marry someone else? Jacob let out a quiet laugh. Caitlin, you still don't get it, do you? There was never anyone else before you. The realization hit me like a wave. My heart started racing. Wait, you were going there that day to stop me from getting married. His gaze was fiery, eyes locked on mine. I didn't think Michael was good enough for you. I was gonna stop the wedding, but then he didn't even show up. So everything that seemed like fate had actually been planned by him. All this time he'd loved me in silence. A man who seemed distant and cold had in truth been carrying a deep, deep and patient love. Age like fine wine, stronger and richer with time. I rose on my tiptoes, wrapped my arms around his neck, and placed a gentle kiss on his lips. Jacob Yi, thank you for not giving up on me. I used to think Michael liked me, at least before Emily came back. He treated me well, but now, after everything, I finally understood. He only cared for me because I reminded him of her. Back then I was so hung up on him that I never noticed the quiet gaze always watching me from behind. Thinking about it now, I'd been hopelessly foolish. Thankfully, Jacob never gave up on me. He reached up to brush away my tears, then lowered his head, and pressed a tender kiss to my brow and eyes. "Caitlin Miller," he whispered, "I finally married the girl I've always loved." He took my hand, his long fingers slid between mine, lacing tightly together. And we walked out of the studio side by side. The soft autumn sunlight fell over us, stretching our shadows across the path ahead. That night when we returned home, Jacob went into his study. After showering, I picked up my phone to reply to a few messages. And out of habit, I opened my social feed to my surprise. I saw something rare. Jacob had actually posted a status update. The photo was a shot of me from behind, taken earlier that day at a university. His caption read, "Dreams fulfilled." Curious, I tapped on his profile, and was stunned to discover that it wasn't his first post. He had simply been hiding them from me. I opened the very first one, a photo of me painting in the studio. The caption read, "She seems to really love painting." The second post was a photo of me sitting at the edge of a basketball court, watching others play. The caption, "Is she watching someone she likes?" My hand trembled as I scrolled through them. There was a 5-year gap, then a new post from 2 years ago, another photo of my silhouette taken from a distance. The caption, "5 years later, I saw her again but now she has someone else." I scrolled faster, heart pounding until I reached the one from the day we got our marriage certificate. I finally married the girl I've always loved. From that day forward, all of his posts were little glimpses of my daily life, and I never noticed a thing. My eyes blurred with tears, and I couldn't stop them from falling. My chest ached with a deep bitter sorrow that made it hard to breathe. All this time, he had always been there watching me from the shadows, quietly standing behind me where I couldn't see him. Even when he saw me with someone else, he didn't dare step forward or disturb my life, but he was Jacob E., the CEO of E Group. He was supposed to shine, to be admired by everyone, standing in the spotlight with the world at his feet. And yet for me, he had been timid, restrained. I stood up and walked straight to his study. The moment I pushed open the door, Jacob looked up. His eyes immediately locking onto my tear-streaked face. Without hesitation, he rose from his seat and quickly walked toward me. I rushed into his arms and hugged him tightly. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close. "Why are you crying?" he asked softly. I choked out the words through my tears. "Jacob Ye, why are you so stupid? Why didn't you tell me all of this? What would you have done if I had actually married Michael?" That day he understood immediately. I had seen his hidden posts, his years of silent love. He gently patted my back. His voice low and steady, "As long as you were happy, that would have been enough for me." I looked up at him through teary eyes, my lips lifting into a shaky smile. "Jacob Ye, from now on I'll only love you." The last time I saw Michael Dawson was at a formal banquet I attended with Jacob. He called out to me just as I was about to leave. I had no choice but to stop. The woman standing next to him wasn't Emily White. I had heard she was now dating some other wealthy heir. Michael looked at me, his expression complicated. "Joey, how have you been?" I glanced at him coolly. "Now that I don't have you or Emily around, I'm doing great." His brow furrowed slightly. "And he looked at me as if you were still clinging to something. Is Jacob Ye good to you?" I tilted my head, gave him a polite smile and said, "Michael, I should thank you for not marrying me. That's what gave me the chance to marry Jacob. I'm very happy now, so please don't ever try to contact me again." Leaving those words behind, I walked back to Jacob and gently slipped my hand into his. "Let's go home," I said softly. Jacob turned to glance at Michael, who was still staring at me from a distance, then he smiled faintly and replied, "All right."